The world after World War II. 1. Military blocs, Cold War. The World War II had changed completely the political composition not only of Europe but also of the whole world. Europe in particular and the world in general witnessed a reorientation of the balance of power. Russia and USA emerged as the leading powers of the world. The entire world was divided by ideological differences, leading to a Cold War between the two superpowers and dividing the world into two power blocs. Formation of military blocs. Though Russians and Americans fought together against Germany in the World War II, soon after the war, the two powers fell apart and began to engage in a Cold War. The reason for this Cold War was the existence of ideological differences between the two nations. Russia felt that under the leadership of USA, the capitalist West might attack communism. They formed into another military power bloc. Thus the world was divided into two rival power blocs. The Western power bloc under the leadership of USA and the Eastern power bloc under the leadership of USSR. The two rival systems of alliances gave birth to a war of tension, and this tension had been termed as Cold War. Cold War. The Soviet Union and Western powers cooperated with each other during the World War II. There did not develop a spirit of real cooperation. Towards the end of the war, Soviet Union and Western powers took opposite stands. The Western powers were agitated over Russian occupation of considerable portion in the Far East. There also existed ideological differences between Soviet Union and Western democracies. The Western powers considered Soviet Union a greater enemy than Hitler and Mussolini. Even before the end of World War II, Russia imposed communist regimes in the East European countries of Poland, Bulgaria, Romania, Hungary, and Yugoslavia. Soviet Union then turned her attention towards Western Europe. These moves of Soviet Union were viewed by the Western powers with great concern. United States took up the responsibility of checking communism. It proposed Truman Doctrine and Marshall Plan to check the increase of communist influence over European continent. These moves and counter moves constituted the beginning of Cold War. Truman Doctrine. Truman Doctrine was a proposal to send military and economic aid to Greece and Turkey. It was a policy of American support to free people who were resisting attempted subjugation by armed minorities or by outside pressure. Marshall Plan. To restrict the growth of communism in Europe, America initiated a program of economic reconstruction of Europe. This program taken up by America is called Marshall Plan. It is named after Marshall, the Secretary of State for America. Brussels Treaty in 1948. Marshall Plan stiffened the Cold War between Eastern and Western Europe. In order to check Russian supremacy and influence, Britain, France, Belgium, Netherlands, Luxembourg, etc. signed the Treaty of Brussels in March 1948. Problems of development of independent nations. Role of independent nations of Asia and Africa in the world affairs. After the World War II, the British and French possessions have largely disappeared from the map. Except for Macau and Hong Kong, Asia has completely rid itself of European and American control. India, with a population of 900 million in the second in number only next to China. India's location is of the highest strategic value. Its army developed into a very powerful one. Its successful campaign in East Pakistan in 1971 gave notice that India was a major power in Asia. India's growing importance since 1960 is reflected in the effort made by Soviet Union to obtain its cooperation. For Soviets, Indian cooperation was essential if they were to counter Chinese and American influence in the region. Indo-China, Indo-Soviet and Indo-US relations are discussed in civics part of this book. Japan. Asia's resurgence is more visible in Japan, which by 1990 had become one of the financial and economic titans of the world. Between 1950 and 1973, its gross domestic product grew at a rate of 10.5% per year, far in excess of that of any other industrial nation. With the growing cooperation between China, Japan, Korea, Taiwan, Singapore, and Hong Kong, a new and formidable challenge to the West is emerging. It was said that there has been a shift in the center of gravity of the world power towards Asia. Bandung Conference of 1955. The Bandung Conference, Asian-African Conference, in which representatives from 29 Asian and African countries participated, met in Indonesia from 18th April to 24th April 1955. Dr. Ali Sestrovamid Jojo, the Prime Minister of Indonesia, was elected as a chairman of the conference. Prime Minister of India, Jawaharlal Nehru, played a very important role in the deliberation of the conference. John Kotelal Wala, Prime Minister of Ceylon, represented his country. Zhou Enlai, Prime Minister of China, and Nasser of Egypt attended the conference. Non-alignment movement. Non-alignment is the characteristic feature of Indian foreign policy. This means that India is not prepared to join either the Anglo-American bloc or the Soviet bloc. Whether it is on the side of justice or truth, whether it would further the cause of universal peace or freedom, and whether it is favorable to India in national interest. Jawaharlal Nehru, the first Prime Minister of India, was the chief architect of this non-alignment movement. Nehru quoted the example of USA that America, after achieving independence by breaking away from the British Empire, avoided being involved in the chaotic situation of Europe. All the USA had its particular sympathies. America remained isolated and natural. Nehru drew American analogy and believed that for a country like India, which attained freedom newly, the non-alignment was the natural policy to pursue. This non-alignment policy of India was not the one of negative neutrality. The non-alignment nations have been able to exert some kind of moderating influence on the two superpowers. The non-aligned nations in UN have formed a third bloc. Role of United Nations in preserving the peace in the world. The United Nations organization, from its inception in 1945, had played a very positive role in avoiding quarrels and near wars, and thus helped in preserving peace. UNO succeeded in getting independence to Indonesia from the Dutch. When Pakistan resorted to aggression over Kashmir, it intervened and tried to avert the war between India and Pakistan. It helped in Cyprus to avert conflict between Greeks and Turks. It also helped about 60 nations in getting liberated from imperialist controls. UNO. Suez Canal crisis. Trouble arose when Egypt's President Nasser announced nationalization of Suez Canal and freezed the funds of Suez Canal. France and Britain challenged it. The issue has raised in the Security Council in 1956 and proposed that in Suez Canal there should be free and open transit without discrimination. The matter became worse when Israel attacked Egyptian position in Suez Canal. It was followed by Anglo-French invasion of Suez Canal. The United States moved the Security Council. Egypt agreed to the stationing of UN forces on her territory. The Secretary General asked the UN to clear the canal area under its supervision and make the canal ready for navigation. Congo. The Congo became independent on 30th June 1960. Very soon, it seemed to be on the verge of disintegration. The President Kasavubu and Premier Lumumba appealed for military help to USA first and then United Nations. Then Secretary General called a meeting of Security Council. A resolution was passed calling upon the government of Belgium withdraw her troops immediately from Congo. The Katanga President Isombi attacked Secretary General. Dr. Bunchi was replaced by Rajeshwar Dayal of India. The forces United Nations seized the radio stations and airfield of Congo. This infuriated the Soviet Union. The Secretary General Dag Hammarskjöld Joel met his death in an air accident on his way to Cango. Israel problem. Egypt and Syria launched an attack on Israel in 1973. On the intervention of UN, the ceasefire was enforced. In 1982, Israel started a massive invasion of Lebanon, which was a powerful base of the Palestine Liberation Organization (PLO). Guerrillas were a threat to safety of Israel. The United Nations Security Council interfered and peace was established there. Iran-Iraq War of 1980. On 21st September 1980, Iraq launched an offensive against Iran, and since then the war continued between the two countries. Many attempts were made by United Nations to stop the war, but its attempts did not result in success. UN help in social, economic and cultural fields. The United Nations strives to promote higher standards of living, full employment, and conditions of economic and social progress and development of the people of the world. Since 1949, the United Nations has published annual reports on world economic conditions. It had published a number of studies in the field of technical assistance and economic development. It gives technical assistance and provides funds. The Food and Agricultural Organization of UN play a major role in giving technical assistance on animal and plant disease control, storage of grains, conservation and prevention of soil erosion, and fishery production and conservation. The International Labour Organization of UN sends commissions of inquiry to investigate the allegations of forced labor, violation of freedom of association. The UN is also concerned with furtherance of human welfare, social justice, and aspiration of man for a better lot of life. Problems of disarmament and nuclear weapons. After the World War II, the world got divided into power blocs and tension prevailed amongst the major powers of the world due to the fear of another world war. Under this tense situation, the countries in the world showed rush for piling up arms. Under this tense situation, the countries in the world showed rush for piling up of arms. The Charter of UN asked the Security Council to formulate plans for the establishment of a system for regulation of armaments. Following the recommendations of the Security Council on 3rd October 1945, a declaration on the general security was signed by the United States, Great Britain, Soviet Union, and China in Moscow. It declared that the four powers were to bring about a practical agreement regarding the regulation of armaments. Soviet Union also approved the declaration, and then the four powers passed a resolution asking the General Assembly to set up a UN Atomic Energy Commission. The commission was asked to make proposals for the control of atomic energy for peaceful purposes and also to suggest effective safeguards against violation and evasions. Soviet Union considered the immediate reduction of armaments as the first step towards restoring world confidence. She also wanted the Commission to make proposals for the prohibition of atomic weapons. On the other hand, United States was not prepared for such a hasty decision. United States, Britain, and USSR signed a partial nuclear test ban in Moscow in 1963. This treaty limited the nuclear tests in the atmosphere, underwater, including territorial waters or high seas. On 12th June 1968, the General Assembly of UNO passed a resolution by which it recommended the adaptation of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. President John of America urged personally before members of the General Assembly to adopt the treaty. Under this treaty, the nuclear powers agreed not to transfer their nuclear weapons to non-nuclear powers.